Welcome to the Brett Snodgrass podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I got a great guest, Mr. Chris Evans, on the show with me. Before I introduce Chris, go over to our new named channel on YouTube, Iron Deep. Subscribe to that channel and leave a comment in the comment section. We love replying to comments. Also, go over to our new website, irondeep.com. And if you're looking for a mastermind men's community, more of a brotherhood that is, and you're looking for a deeper relationship with God and deeper relationship with other businessmen, please go over to irondeep.com and apply. We're hosting our first retreat in September. Love for you guys to apply. See what we can do there if you're a good fit for our community. All right, Chris Evans. Chris Evans is a serial entrepreneur. He is a Christian man, a philanthropist. He has started multiple companies, sold companies. He is always in the cutting edge technology. He describes what he's into now. And Chris is probably could be the smartest person I have ever interviewed on this podcast, by the way. He is super intelligent, has so much wisdom behind his ears, but his humility exceeds all of that, and he's just a down-to-earth guy. I loved my interview with Chris Evans. He talks about some things that he's doing in the business world. He talks about some ministry things that he's doing, and he is always interested and very passionate about businesses that are making an impact. Now, here he is, guys, Mr. Chris Evans. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, man. Super excited for this podcast episode interviewing you. You're one of the most intelligent men I think I've talked to. We chatted for about 15 minutes before the show, and I'm like, wow, you got a lot going on, and you are super smart.
Well, that's kind of you.
But man, Chris Evans, serial entrepreneur. You've started a lot of companies, sold some companies. You're involved with a lot of different things. You're open about your Christian faith, which is amazing. You're a philanthropist, and you got your foot in a lot of different things going on there. And we're going to talk about some of these different things. You have a book, Fruit at Work. We're going to talk about mixing Christian virtues in the business world. So we're going to get into that. But let's just start with this, Chris. Who is Chris Evans?
That's a lifelong question, right? But I would say that Chris Evans is insatiably curious, always looking for something new to learn about. At different times, I've dug deep into theology, but I've also learned how to be a sand sculptor, repair pinball machines. I'm working with a friend on a technique for building local energy distribution networks for neighborhoods once solar allows it. So there's always, we live in a big world. There's always new and exciting things to learn about.
That's right.
So I think that's where I am.
That's right. I know you've had so much success even at an early age. You've built up companies, sold companies, and even now before the show, just talk about a few things that you're into now. You always seem like you're in some of the latest things, inventing things, or being a part of that at least. You have a face mask company that you're working with, and new technologies. So talk to us about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So you know, we live in a time where there's a lot of new innovations coming out, but there's a big gap in how you get them to market. I did start a company during COVID times that was making face masks. The company's called Aries USA. And what happened was that I happened to be introduced to a professor who's one of the world experts on filtration media. And he had come up with, the face masks that we were all wearing, at least the one, like the medical ones, the ones that filter decently, pretty much using the same tech that came from the 80s. Not a lot of change there. He actually invented a new material that decreases the air pressure, the amount it takes to breathe through the mask by cuts it in half or even less for the same amount of filtration. And so he had the fabric, but he hadn't made a product out of it yet. So we worked out a way to be able to get a product made, several 100,000 of them pretty rapidly, to help respond and at least provide a more comfortable product for all of us who are stuck in having to wear masks a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I'm also near and dear to my heart is an organization called Door International. Door is working with the deaf around the world to do church planting. Because there's hundreds of deaf sign languages and very few of them have any Bible translation. That also means that we're having to do deaf Bible translation, which is translating the Bible into sign language is closer to making Harry Potter the movie than making Harry Potter in Italian.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's just a lot of different steps that you have to do. And the deaf are, they're wonderful. And now this is like, now that video is cheap enough to distribute everywhere for free, this is the first time, because sign language isn't a written language. Gutenberg made no difference to them. This is the first time in history that the deaf can mass distribute things that they in their languages. And so we are sort of at a Gutenberg moment for the deaf. And it's just fascinating to see the gospel exploding around the world.
Wow.
With them.
Wow. Oh, that's super amazing. Yeah, man, you're doing so many, and you have a diaper company you're a part of too, and technology.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I had another friend of mine, or somebody I was connected with, who had come across an invention to make super absorbents, which is the stuff that sucks all the liquid up in diapers and other things. Right now, that's all made out of petroleum-based products. We found a way to do that with cornstarch. And so not only is it bioderived, biodegradable, making a much greener diaper, but it's also tied to the price of corn, not oil, which is good news for the manufacturers while they're watching oil spike up and, losing control of their cost processes.
Wow.
So, and a lot of times I'm just sort of touching them in certain places, right? Helping them figure out a particular strategy or connecting them with people necessary. It's most of the work is really being done by the full-time entrepreneurs in these organizations.
Yeah. Well, it just seems like you really are passionate about being a part of organizations that make an impact, that make the world a better place. They're doing good. I mean, all these companies, you're trying to help people. And it seems like that's exactly what you're passionate about. And I heard you on a talk, and you're talking about your faith, and you wrote a book, Fruit at Work, Mixing Christian Virtues with Business. And you started off your talk talking about you gave your life to Christ, but you had what you would call Christian amnesia. Can you talk about what that means?
Yeah, I would go into work and I would think, and I'd maybe be listening to worship music on the way into work, or I'd have a nice quiet time. And I'd get into work, and then I'd get into a couple of meetings, and then the day would come on and I'd leave the office, and it was like, I just totally forgot I was Christian today. Or either that, or there might be, almost like, here's a commercial message from God. This is totally out of context, but let me jam this thing in here somewhere, right. Which is also kind of weird and unsettling to the people around you.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, the challenge was that if your faith is in your heart, right, it's coming out of the core of who you are, then it ought to be organic. It ought to be natural. It ought to be it ought to make something different about how you are all the time. Not just, let me here step into this Christian hat, put my hat on, do that thing, and now I can go back to my meeting and focus on getting something done. And I've always been trying to figure out how do you do that? How do you walk in that way? And so that led me to the study of the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah. And which you basically wrote this book, and you talk about the fruits of the Spirit. It's broken down, the 9 fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so how did you use the fruits of the Spirit? Which was it more of like, you seem like you're a very practical individual. How do you practice that? How do you do that? So you started to study these fruits, and how did you use them in the workplace?
Yeah, well, what happened was that originally I had a pastor ask me if I would teach a class on workplace evangelism for Sunday school, and I said, well, let me think about it. And I prayed about it, and I came back, and I said I turned him down. And he said, well, why? I said, well, because you're not teaching the prerequisite. He says, what do you mean? I said, you're not teaching workplace Christianity. How would you possibly want to duplicate what's not working and clumsy? And so he sort of shrugged and said, well, teach that then, and walked off. So he got the last word on it. But now it put me on the spot to figure out what I could teach on this. And what led me to the fruit of the Spirit, what I like about it is it's a series of attitudes and habits that are authentically Christian, right? Love, joy, peace, patience. These are things that as we try to grow in our walk, we try to get better in these things. But they're also, I think, when practiced artfully and honestly, are highly valued in the workplace. And so I felt like, okay, here's an approach where if you're thinking about, okay, I come every day with this tool set, and everybody, you don't have to be a Christian to have love, joy, peace, or patience, but we're putting extra time in. Well, somebody else is working on working on their slice on the golf range, or working on beating the next ultra boss in some video game. We're working on trying to refine our Christian selves, trying to align more with Christ. And so if we're investing that time, then these are things that we ought to be able to get better on. It's a foundation to build upon. And as we practice them and learn to practice them in the workplace, it also, I think, makes us more authentically and feel more authentically Christian outside of it. And we can talk about some of them, but that was the idea of it, is to be able to take this set of words and sort of have it be something, that a tool set that everyone can walk into any job and feel like, these are the tools that I have as a Christian to bring to my work today.
Yeah, definitely. Well, do you have any, let's just give maybe a couple of examples. So we break down the 9 fruits of the Spirit. Let's just maybe talk about the first few: love, joy, and peace. And can you give maybe some practical situations in the workplace where you maybe personally have had to think about these three things and practice them?
Yeah. So, I mean, love is a tricky word in the English language because it's one word that means lots of different things, right? So there's an erotic love, definitely probably not a good thing to bring to work. That gets complicated. There's a brotherly love that is natural. You wind up having this, you have this brotherly love for your teammates, and you like being a part of a team that's working well together. And so there's that. But the love that shows up here comes from this Greek word agape, that really wasn't written about within Greek philosophers. They really didn't talk much about this word. It really didn't show up until Jesus started using it in the Gospels. And the reason was because they maybe saw it as a fiction. It had to do with a love that a non-self-interested love. You're basically loving somebody for their benefit, whether it helps you or hurts you. Right? Other kinds of love, I love what it feels like to be a part of a team, so I'm going to love you because it makes me feel like I'm a good part of a team.
Yeah.
Right? Erotic love comes with its own attractions. But this is a kind of love that is, God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And that's Romans 4:20-21, that you have we could do nothing good for Jesus. In fact, he knew that we were going to murder him. But yet he had love. Right. Yeah. And so the Greeks didn't know what to do with this. It was like, theoretically possible, I suppose, but who would ever do that?
Yeah.
Until the gospel showed up and showed the power of it. Well, in the workplace, I guess when I try to approach somebody, I'm trying to figure out, as I talk to them, what usually for an entrepreneur, they're trying to it's serial problem solving. They're always trying to figure out, what's the next thing I have to solve and how do I solve it, just to arrive in advance.
Yeah. Right.
And it's sometimes it's in parallel, but a lot of times when you talk to somebody, eventually you figure out the thing that is keeping them from moving to the next level. And sometimes, sometimes in talking to somebody, maybe it somehow benefits me to help them. Sometimes it doesn't help me at all. Sometimes it might even hurt me. But my interest in that person, that conversation, is sort of understanding what that need is.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting thing. So within work, I mean, it may seem like, well, then you're handicapped if you're doing it this way, but you're not, you see, because I guess what I found is that to get anything done in work requires trust. There's a certain amount of trust for somebody to agree with you to do anything, whether to come to work for you, to invest in you, to buy your product, to write about your product in the press. All these things require some level of trust. And it turns out that the people who you trust the most are the people who love you every time.
Amen.
Right. And so if you develop this habit of just being interested in people and how do you help them forward, without sort of having to calculate, well, which ones do I invest in and what do I get out of that? Or how can I make this thing turn to my advantage? You wind up with this deep, deep well of trust to be able to draw from, that you can then leverage to get lots of other things done. And I mean, to me, that pool of trust is a more useful tool than any tactical advantage that you might take in a particular relationship or friendship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, exactly. And we obviously, every business works with people. So if you can apply these fruits of the Spirit towards people, love and patience, being kind to them, and it builds this trust. And you talk about, even in your talk, trust is huge. Trust is everything. And if I trust you, that just means that means so much, right? I mean, people look at our business, look at me, and they'll give me, well, investors, right? You talk about companies, investors. Like, I mean, a lot of it is really just, it's not even about the numbers. It's really, do I trust you? That's the main thing.
And it's also, I mean, there's a whole economy of trust. It's sort of the first currency that an entrepreneur has access to before they have capital and money to work with and everything else. And so when you're starting with trust, a lot of times it's almost like you're having to go to a trust banker, right? Somebody who already has trust with the person that you're working with, who's willing to lend some of it to you, right? And if you may return that trust and interest. Hopefully, it's like and a lot of times I'm always doing this, is I'm always connecting people. Probably 5 times today, I send emails saying, "Hey, you two ought to talk to each other. Here's why I think that you ought to hear this person out and see what's going on." If I make good use of their time, right? If I have somebody who can help an entrepreneur advance, and I make that connection, and that person was like, "I'm really glad you set that meeting up," then I got interest on my trust investment.
Yeah.
Right. On the other hand, if it's like, that was a waste of time, why did you have me meet with them? That's a loss.
Yeah.
Right. So, and you still do that. I mean, the nice thing with trust is that it's not, it's possible to accumulate. You can build on it over time, but in terms of the relationships, there's a lot of things that you can get done as you start to look and say, okay, if I don't have this trust now. Another place that it shows up is oftentimes when there's conflict, when I have employees who aren't getting along with each other, you follow the trust, right? Somebody is not trusting somebody as much as the system was expecting them to. And sometimes it has to do with, I had an employee, we had a new boss come in, and they were much younger than an employee, and the employee didn't feel like the boss respected the experience that they had in the job. The boss didn't feel like the employee respected their position, that they were sort of they were patronizing them. And between themselves, there wasn't sort of enough trust between them to be able to break through that. But because I developed trust with both of them, I could come in and say, yeah, okay, Sarah, I know that you don't think that Mark respects you, but I've talked to Mark. I know that he does. That's not the issue. For my sake, would you take the next week and act as if he does, even if you're not feeling it? Right. And then Mark, I know that you feel like Sandra doesn't see where you are. I know that she kind of does, but this thing that you're doing is interfering with that, making it hard for her to see. Would you, I'm telling you that she does. Will you act as if, she respects your experience within this space for the next week, and see if things will work. And I could lend trust into that situation and kind of break through a log jam within it. And, it's not like, it's not like they send Christmas cards to each other every week or anything, but but they were able to sort of get through and get to a working relationship.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times in personal relationships and other things, you're kind of following the trust, figuring out what trust isn't happening, and is there a place that you can lend or inject trust into the situation to kind of get things moving again.
Yeah. And I think it just goes back to show when you do have that, and you have the trust, even trust in the gospel, that you act, even if you don't feel like it sometimes, right? Sometimes, so many times we're just kind of like getting tossed around with our feelings, and we're going this way and that way, and we're living life that way.
And that's what faith is. I mean, that's something that I've been writing about more recently, is that faith is kind of one of these squishy words that another, like love. We're not quite sure what we mean by it, but it means something that has something to do with our spiritual life and everything else. To me, faith is a muscle. Like what you said, sometimes God is so real to me, I can feel him breathing down the back of my neck. But there's other times where I feel like I have an imaginary friend called God, and I'm just playing games. But all of those times, I know why I've walked this way, right? And so when I don't feel him close, when I have that emotional doubt, when my emotions don't line up with what I know, I can go back and say, okay, has anything changed about what I know? It was Jesus real? Was his walk real? Can we trust that he said what he said? Can we trust that he was resurrected? When you put those things together, the place that I am is responsible. And so I can continue working as if it was true until I start feeling like it's true again, until that feeling comes back. And that's faith, right? But it's not just spiritual faith. A lot of people, I know for me, so many meetings I walk in to have a conversation, even this one, where it's like, today's the day that everyone figures out I'm a fraud, and it's just, Brett is going to get on and he's going to say, oh, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Why would anyone ever want to talk to you? And you can have these feelings, right? And it's you can't control that, right? But what faith allows you to do is it allows you to continue on the path that you're on, regardless of how you feel about it. And so in selling situations, when you're going in and having to sell somebody something, or going into a meeting, all of these things, the muscle that you build up as a believer to be able to sort of live up to those doubts and work past them is the same muscle that allows somebody to go ahead and persevere when they're afraid that they're going to get laughed at the next meeting or something else is not going on. They can go back. I mean, the one thing, the facts will never change in my faith in Christ. There may be things that I may actually have a harebrained idea of my own that somebody should tell me, yes, that's stupid, you should stop doing that. So I have to, you have to be open-minded to it, but you just remember, okay, what are the reasons why I believe this is a good idea? Has anything changed? If it hasn't changed, then I should act like I believe it. And so that, I think that one of the strengths that believers have, that faith muscle that they can bring to their work situations, even when it's not a spiritual issue, but their ability to kind of be steadfast in a way where other people may not have that practice to, is important.
Definitely. Just having that foundation, something that you can hold on to, grab onto, and carry with you, just that foundation in Christ. And you even talked about identity. And I think one of the biggest things as business owners and business, like even for me personally, identity is huge. I stepped out of my business a couple of years ago, and you might have experienced this as well. After 15 years of running this business, grinding, stepping out and letting someone else kind of run the business, I was a little lost. I was a little like, who am I now?
Who am I now? No,
identity is a huge thing in a business professional's life. So like, maybe you can talk about this. Like, how have you struggled? You've been in multiple businesses, sold businesses, built businesses. How have you struggled with like your own identity in your journey?
And that's a great question. So you talked about sort of even early on, I was an entrepreneur. I started my first software company when I was a freshman in college. We actually created the first email program to run on Windows. This was back in the 80s when you would just send email to other people in your office. There wasn't an internet where I could email you. I could only email like other people in my building.
Wow.
But that was still, a big enough thing that people were doing it. And so we had literally started in a college dorm room, built a business to where we had a couple million users around the world. I was traveling all over the world, setting up distributorships and deals with people in other parts of the world to translate the software and sell it in their countries and everything else. I was doing this with my best friend. We were best men at each other's weddings, and had and we're just sort of like a couple of kids in a sandbox, just figuring out how to be able to build things. Until one day he felt he said that he thought it was the right time for me to leave the company, which came as a surprise to me. I wasn't at all thinking that. Really what I couldn't see from the inside was that I was a really arrogant guy. And there were a lot of people, I treated people like they were stupid and made it obvious to them that that's what I thought. And ultimately, and you burn a lot of trust that way, right? And there were things that I needed to learn in that process. And so, but my identity, the thing that made me special, and I was walking around, is I was this, this kid who had started, one of the only ones in our town who had started a software company, right? And now I don't have that. What does that mean? And, it always, even, at the moment that I heard it, it came as a surprise to me. But fortunately, I was already walking with Christ, and I already, I had big plans for my life. And to me, the process of becoming a Christian was trading in this treasure map I had where with all the X's I was going to dig up and everything I was going to build, for this mystery behind the curtain, like, and let's make a deal. Right. You're going to trade this in. I'm going to give you what's behind the curtain. And I'm not going to tell you what's behind the curtain, but I will tell you that, and this is God, right? I will tell you that I know you better than you love yourself, and I love you more than you love you. And it's going to be a blast. Wow. And it's like, okay, I will take that deal. And so sometimes that, sometimes that means that you're, in your car with a box outside your building, wondering what just happened. Except that if God was going to go to all that trouble to arrange those things, then he must have something important going on next. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of the time, I mean, you ask me who I am or what I do. Those are complicated questions for me because I'm in a lot of different things, but I don't really. I'm just a child of God trying to do the good that's in front of me.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
and that's that. All I have to do.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's even simpler than that, I'll say it's John 14:6 that Jesus says that the work of God is to believe in him who sent me. That's all it is. It is, we think that there's all these things that we have to do. What Jesus said, and all the apostles are, tell us what we need to do. We want to go do these things. We want to go kick butt. And he's like, yeah, believe in me. That's it. You can put your pencil down. Yeah. That's the only thing on the list.
Wow.
And so, and that is work, but it's a different kind of work. And I think from an identity standpoint, we want our identities to be in work or what we've achieved or anything else. And part of our walk with God is to sort of trade those things in, and to be willing to be content with and prize the thing behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's just that maturing of the soul. And I see this happen a lot of times. We give our life to Christ, and we don't mature. We just keep drinking the baby bottle of the gospel for our life. But you're talking about really going deeper, maturing the soul. And I want to bring up this the fruit of the Spirit, self-control, because I think that the maturing of the soul, this is something that doesn't get a lot of praise. Love and having joy and peace in your life, that's some good stuff. But self-control, you mean I can't do what all my desires want to do?
Well,
yes. So anyways, talk about that.
Yeah, yes and no. True confessions here. When I wrote, when I wrote the book, eventually I had to finish it, and I felt like most of the fruit of the Spirit, I felt like I really did meditate on it to get to a place where I felt like I had what God wanted me to share. With self-control, I spent time reflecting on it, and really what I write, it's a little more than this, but it's still a little bit of finger wagging, right? Here's some good reasons why you shouldn't do those things that are going to get you in trouble. Here's examples of people who got in trouble, whatever. I hope to revise. I plan to revise Fruit at Work. It's been 10 years since I've written it. The fruit are the same. A lot of the work situations are the same, but I think there's a richer story I have to tell about them. But self-control is a little bit different because I think that now what I see is that self-control is more like willpower. Right, which cuts in both directions. It's not just the things that you don't do; it's also the things that you do. Right. I feel like there's, if there's a well of trust, there's another well of willpower where there's habits that you should take on and habits that you should break, but it takes energy to change trajectory.
Yeah.
Right. When you get home today, whatever you do tonight was probably what you thought you were going to do tonight. Right. And if instead you find a quiet room with a hardback book and a chair and, be the person so you wanted to be, who's the one who reads more and binge watches less, there's some possibility of being able to do that. But there's a lot of momentum locking you into, that next season of whatever it is that, is waiting for you on Netflix. So to be able to do that takes a certain amount of change. And also, maybe it's the 10 o'clock giant bowl of ice cream, right? And it's just something that you're not doing, or maybe it's what's waiting on the internet for you to watch after your wife goes to bed. I mean, there's all these different things that are out there, but but this self-control is a fruit of the spirit. The fruit of the spirit, the love that it's building in terms of you for other people, kind of equips you to think about putting them first. The joy that you have is the joy, which is more than happiness. Joy comes deep out from within you, and it has this way of shining whatever momentary pleasure it is that you think that you were going to get from other things. When you see it, when you can grasp a hold of it. Peace is an acknowledgement that I have the things that I have. Paul writes in Timothy that wisdom with contentment is good, because we brought nothing into this world, we can take nothing out of it. And he's writing near the end of his life at this point. So much left to do in terms of building a church, but he's been able to find this place of contentment. He doesn't need anything else. There's nothing driving him to it. You can see how all these things sort of stack up to be able to build this wall that builds and grows this pool of willpower to be able to draw from.
Yeah. And I think you related self-control back to love, and the Bible obviously talks a lot about the bridegroom and with Christ. And I relate a lot of times this relationship, like my closest relationship is my spouse here. So sometimes I relate that to my relationship with God. But it just kind of goes back. Like, I love my wife, so I have to practice certain levels of self-control. I can't just do whatever I feel like at the moment. And the same thing with God, right? If we truly love God, he calls us to have self-control in certain things. So,
how long have you been married?
I'm celebrating 10 years this year.
10 years. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
10 years
fun.
Is a good run.
It is.
It's a good run. My wife and I have been married for 32 years.
Wow.
Or it'll be 32 in June. And we started dating in high school. We were dating for 6 years before we got married.
Wow.
But the thing is, you become different. I've been married to several different women.
Yeah.
They're all named Kathy. Right. But I mean, the Kathy the Kathy I said my vows with in the church is a different Kathy than the one that we had kids with. It's a different Kathy than the one that we raised and sent kids off into the world with. And other crises and unwelcome surprises come in and that you have to deal with. And so I think that, for people who are maybe new in relationships, they may think, well, I just have this one person I'm going to be, for the rest of my life. After the first 10 years, what are we going to do? It's like, the game will change.
It will change. Yeah.
There are sequels. And it will be other things. And
the seasons change. We were just talking about that right now. I mean, we have 4 kids, and so the first 10 years has been a lot of babies and diapers and new schools, and now we're entering the season where we're done with the kids for right now, and we're just a different season. So what are we gonna do now?
and it is you grow into different people, and I think that it's it keeps getting bigger relationally, and I can tell I thought I loved my wife as best as I knew how to, or best as I'd be able to at 10 years. But we're just in a very different place now. I mean, there's events and circumstances that we've run into that we never would have expected, that have challenged us. And now we will spend so much more, and it's great, being an empty nester. We can sit at the dinner table for an hour and a half just talking. There's nobody we have to help with homework with. There's nobody we have to get to bed or take baths, or nothing else waiting on. It's just inevitably almost every night a topic comes up and we just start talking. And next thing you know, another hour or so has gone by. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Chris, we're about out of time. Thank you for sharing just everything. I want to just get back to one thing. So I was reading kind of on your bio, and you were once, and still are, from advertising age, you were called a digital media master. So like I'm thinking of like a ninja black belt here in digital media. So I just
Yeah.
want to like, obviously you talked about starting this software company in your dorm room. Things have changed a little bit since the 80s and
Yeah.
90s.
Yeah.
In our culture today, just getting back to
Mhm.
Christianity and
Mhm.
media, don't you think it's a little bit inconvenient with your marketing background to kind of really put yourself out there as a Christian? I mean, are you setting yourself up?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I wouldn't think so. And originally where that came from was that the third software company I created was actually the one of the first ones to manage advertising on websites. Right when ad-supported websites were coming out, they needed some system that would decide what ad to put on each page, track them, everything else, and we wound up building that. And there's a lot of jobs. At the time that we did it, there was sort of one person who was doing internet advertising on a website. Now it's a whole office full of people with complicated workflows and everything else. I guess for me, there's always been a matter of once you've solved the technology, once you've figured out how to make a new innovation, you have to solve the psychology.
Mm,
You have to understand, how does this meet a felt need of somebody? Um, how does this align with what people already want to do? Because normally, the classic mistake is that people think, well, my innovation is so great and so important and so useful that people are just going to stop what they're doing and change to do it my way later.
mm,
Changing a habit is really expensive and really hard.
mm.
And most technology company failures that I follow came because they underestimated the amount that it takes to change a habit.
Yeah.
Right. This
Interesting.
is, I only did this because I knew that within our country, we were going to develop a mask habit. Right. By the time of the pandemic, it may be some of us will wear masks all the time. All of us will wear masks some of the time, but it's no longer something that you only see going on in Asia on television.
Yeah. Right.
And so I knew there was going to be a new habit. There was an opportunity to sort of fill that vacuum,
Yeah.
if you will.
And it was a
But a
forced,
lot
and
of
and
times,
it was interesting because yeah, it was a forced habit for a while, and then
yeah,
habits just develop. All of a sudden, yeah, at
yeah,
first we were like, "This is weird. No one's gonna do this," and
yeah,
then literally 6 months later, we're
yeah.
all doing
But,
it.
but that almost never. I mean, you think about how often. I mean, what a huge change
Yeah.
that was in a country. How much energy did it take? How much distraction? How much force did it take to actually change that,
Yeah.
and get that happening? And it's so hard to do that. And so to me, when you're looking at different products, you're trying to understand people, what's going on in their heart, what are they looking for? And I mean, to me, that's love enabled,
Mm,
right? If you do it right, I don't think I've ever made a product or tried to make a product that I thought was going to benefit. Wasn't going to do Brett any good, but it was going to make me some money,
yeah.
right? I mean, there's too many really cool ideas out in the world that can make your life better, your kids' life better,
Mm,
your wife's life better. Those are the things I want to get out into the market. And
yeah.
when you give people an opportunity to, where you really think this is a way that makes their life better, and it also isn't, you're not asking them to make a huge leap from where they are. You're sort of naturally leading them, to a path. I think you have to understand people better, and you have to want to bless people to do it.
Mm, amen. Just personal curiosity, since you're a
Yeah,
curious person, personal curiosity. Obviously,
yeah.
you've been through the digital media age. What is your take today on the social media, just all that, and
Mm-hmm.
the consequences and the blessings that come with it? What's your
So,
what's your take on
so
it?
coincidentally, I teach I actually, one of the other hats I wear, I teach a class at the school my kids went to, Trinity Academy here in Raleigh. And I can talk about whatever I want every week. It's just anything I want to talk about. And today's topic was, should you delete your social media?
Mm,
And uh, there's right now we have employed a lot of people, and I think what doesn't feel like love is employing a lot of our country's brightest minds to figure out how to get people to stay watching something that's doing them no good for longer. Right?
yeah.
How do I get them to
How do I
quit
buy your
to keep
attention?
clicking like or swiping right, or swiping down on the next TikTok? And how do I, the sort of attention engineering
Yeah.
um, doesn't feel like love.
Mm,
right, within that process. I mean, the tough thing is, I mean, with Facebook, as an adult, Facebook is like a better, more personal newspaper, right? I have a dear friend whose wife's funeral I made it to on Monday because I knew from Facebook that his wife had died.
Yeah.
I might have missed it otherwise because I'd been out of town. And so, the people I'm around, I can be connected to, particularly when we're geographically not seeing each other or next to each other as much as we are in college or high school or anything else. And I think that's useful. The problem is that the owners of Facebook, Facebook isn't worth $1 billion if all it's doing is helping me know what my friends are doing. Right. It's only worth $1 billion if you can make me do something I don't want to do, or make me, learn, make me follow something that I don't really feel like following and doesn't profit me.
Yeah.
And so it's not a win-win game. Unfortunately, it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
And that's, there's an alternate history where Facebook was content doing the thing that it was good at that blessed people, and just didn't make the founder, $1 gazillion. And it would have been fine. But right now, in a lot of these cases, I think investment pressure is forcing them to some degree to corrupt the inherent goodness that's in the idea.
Yeah. I think it goes back to just, if you're self-controlled, I think it can be a blessing. Like, you go to your friend's wife's funeral. But most people don't even think about that. They just swipe like. So anyways, that's a different topic for a different day. But Chris, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Really appreciate you, brother. Everything that you're doing. And I always ask this question at the end, just to give maybe a quick book reference if someone's interested. But obviously your book, Fruit at Work, guys, pick that up. We're going to put that in our show notes. But is there a best book that you've recently read, Chris?
So I just read From Strength to Strength by Art Brooks. And Art is he's a fascinating writer. He brings social science in. What Strength to Strength looks at is this question of what happens. There was a kind of an article. Well, there's an article that came out in the Atlantic that pretty much talked about, for most people, they're at their peak brain strength in their 30s. And whatever if you're a physicist, or if you're a lawyer, or if you're a writer, whatever, your best work is somewhere in your 30s. Definitely, once you're past 35, you're definitely kind of moving down the curve, which is really, and the Atlantic's demographic is like people my age. Yeah. And so this is really, this is all depressing. And what Art said is, no, there's a couple kinds of intelligence. So there's a fluid intelligence, maybe the intelligence that's pure creativity, creating something out of nothing. But then there's a crystallized intelligence that relies more upon your life experiences and the connections that you make. It's almost like you have a really big library and you know where all the books are, and you can say, that reminds me of this. I'm going to connect this with this. And it kind of speaks to being reassuring that basically your best days aren't behind you, but you might need to have a willingness to stop fighting to hold on to the thing that you were doing before, and a willingness to jump into and try to be a different way to be smart. And that resonates, whether it's putting new wine into old wineskins or other things. There's a number of places in that. And I think from a believer standpoint, that we can always trust God with that. I mean, if you think about Paul's best years, he thought he was going to be the next Gamaliel, the next great Judaic scholar, following all the best guys, and he was going to get published and written up, and everyone was going to bow to him in Jerusalem and everything else. And then he he went on a road to Emmaus, and he went on a road to Damascus, and his life totally changed. It was a different kind of intelligence, a different kind of thinking that he was prepared for. And to me, it just, I could see the gospel. I could see how God's hand works in people in Art's book.
Yeah, no, I love that. So Strength to Strength. They're going to put that in our show notes too. Check out our YouTube channel, guys, and our show notes on that. And Chris, I just want to say I enjoy hanging out with the Chris Evans at your age rather than when you were 32. So I appreciate being on the podcast today. Very, very smart guy. It's been a blessing, Chris. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Brett.